We are well into the second week of Roland Garros, and it's been a wild tournament already, but I think we might have just witnessed one of the most chaotic weeks in tennis last week. Impossible comebacks, emotional meltdowns, strange incidents with the crowd. Both tours went fully unhinged in week 1 of Roland Garros, but I found a way to put together all the action. Here's everything that happened in tennis last week. The tears were rolling down everyone's cheeks as we witnessed what could have been Rafa's last match at Roland Garros. Only 2 men had beaten him in the 115 matches he played in the tournament, Novak Djokovic twice and that memorable Robin Soderling 4th round win back in 2009. Let me say this, Rafa got the worst possible draw and had to face Zverev in round 1. Yet we hoped for one last miracle. Novak, Alcaraz, and Iga Swiatek all took time out of their busy schedules to honor the King of Clay by being in attendance. Despite Rafa going down an early break, we were treated to moments of brilliance like this. Zverev took the first set, but Rafa came to compete, so he did this to hold serve. Rafa then broke Zverev and would have chances throughout the match, but just couldn't convert. Zverev took the second set with a narrow win in the tiebreak. Being the fighter that we know him to be, Rafa continued to soldier on, bringing the crowd to their feet with this play right here. But in the end, Zverev was just too hot to handle. He was clutch on his first serve, winning about 72% of points, while Rafa could only manage 58%, and that right there made the difference. In the end, a straight set defeat for the King of Clay. In my opinion, Zverev showed a lot of class and respect for Rafa with his muted celebration. And Rafa had this to say after the match.
You know, it's difficult for me to talk. I don't know, it's gonna be the last time that I'm gonna be here in front of all of you.
It had me thinking about what being in Rafa's shoes might actually feel like. It's like you want to do a proper goodbye ceremony for him, but then he says stuff like, "This might not be my last Rome, this might not be my last Roland Garros, but there's a huge chance that it is." It seems to me that he wants to leave the door open and then move the goalpost depending on how he feels on the court, because after the loss, he mentioned that he's been pleased with his physical progress so far. But what do you think of the situation? Honestly, the whole uncertainty thing is really just nerve-wracking for many fans. Hopefully, by the time the Olympics come around, we'll have a little bit more clarity on the situation. But speaking of the Olympics, someone wasn't too happy with being snubbed from his country's lineup. So Pedro Martinez thinks it's unfair that players get to use their protected ranking to qualify to play in the Olympics. And since Rafael Nadal and Pablo Carreño Busta might both be using their PRs, Martinez will likely miss out on a spot despite being among the top 4 Spaniards. The other 2 guys being Carlitos and Davidovich Fokina. Now let's clear the air here. Martinez mentioned that as a fan, he would love to see Nadal at the Olympics, but he feels hard done by missing out. On his end, he might be thinking that Rafa's GOAT status is understandable, but probably not Carreño Busta, even though Carreño Busta is actually an Olympic medalist. In fact, he actually did beat Djokovic to win the bronze medal at the Tokyo Olympics. Martinez said that he deserved a spot as well. In his words, quote, "I don't see it as entirely fair. It's as if I get injured now and in 4 years I use the protected ranking in the Los Angeles Games." End quote. Does the 27-year-old Martinez have a point in your opinion? Be sure to let me know because I've seen arguments made on both sides. Should Pablo Carreño Busta, who's barely played competitive matches in the last year due to a right elbow injury, actually deserve a spot? And this begs the question, should protected rankings be used in the first place? Personally, I think we all want to see Nadal play at the Olympics either way. Speaking of Spaniards, a certain guy has been killing it all week at Roland Garros. Our boy Carlitos has now reached 6 consecutive Grand Slam quarterfinals. Although he admits that quarterfinal appearances aren't enough, I think his French Open run this year has been really impressive considering the physical struggles and bumps along the road that he's had to deal with. Alcaraz came into the tournament saying that he no longer felt pain in his arm, but still had doubts about taking big cuts at the ball. Carlos brought the heat against JJ Wolf in the first round, totally annihilating Wolf with shots like this. Wolf managed to win only 4 games the entire match. Alcaraz faced Jesper de Jong in the second round. He started the match well and was really cranking that forehand. But then Alcaraz began to give away points like he was doing a charity donation. The 23-year-old De Jong troubled Alcaraz with his consistent depth, and it paid off big time in the third set. Alcaraz even trailed by a break in the fourth set, but managed to regain concentration and take care of business in 4 sets. Alcaraz hit 35 winners, but committed 47 unforced errors in that match, and he knew he had to improve if he wanted it easy with Seb Korda in the third round. Alcaraz put some pep in his step against the American, who also didn't play badly, albeit this bad miss right here cost Korda the first set. The rest of the match was close, and I was impressed with the fight that Korda brought. But at the end of the day, Korda's improved forehand and aggression weren't enough. Another straight sets win for Carlos. By the time he faced Felix in the fourth round, we were already seeing the best of Alcaraz. And let's just say that Felix was no match. Oh, you should totally see this beautiful pickup from Alcaraz right here. That pickup was followed by a number of drop shots and ridiculous passing shots. Alcaraz played front foot tennis the entire match, dispatching Felix in 2 hours and 20 minutes to bring their head-to-head level at 3-all. Felix's serve and forehand, his 2 biggest weapons, weren't that effective against Alcaraz. Boy, he still needs to work on those double faults. Although there were only 5 this time, you don't have to look back too far to see his 13 double faults in his loss to de Minaur in Rome. Yeah, I know Felix matched his best result at Roland Garros by reaching the fourth round, but even his win against Shelton in the third wasn't all that impressive because Shelton just looked lost at many points in the match, with all those shanks and errors. Ben plans to play in Stuttgart in the next couple of days, and he would be proud of some of the improvements he's made on clay. But before we talk about the other eye-catching performances from last week, let's quickly touch on a rather weird subject: the alcohol ban. In the United States, it's quite common to see alcohol being served, particularly at the US Open. And while I know there might be some cultural differences in how fans relate with alcohol, I'm not quite sure what to make of Amélie Mauresmo's decision to ban it at Roland Garros. The decision came days after a disrespectful fan, who was probably intoxicated, spat chewing gum at David Goffin in Goffin's 5-set win over Perricard. Goffin said that the crowd went too far and that soon there were going to be smoke bombs, hooligans, and fights in the stands like in soccer. In an emergency meeting, Amélie emphasized that player safety comes first and that any fan who overstepped boundaries would be kicked out of the stands. But now some are of the opinion that the crowds could be just as rowdy with or without alcohol. Other fans thought that Amélie banning alcohol was a bit of an overreaction. Should they have just tightened the regulations on alcohol instead of banning it outright? Let me know, because I'm thinking yes, she overreacted. Drinking at these events can be a fun part of the experience. It's just on the fans to control themselves and on security to police the bad apples. But really, the crowd has been a thing at Roland Garros. Iga Swiatek complained about the screams earlier in the week. Take a listen to this.
I want to say one thing. I'm sorry to even bring that. I have huge respect for you guys, and I know that we are playing basically for you because this is entertainment, and we're also earning money because of you. But sometimes, you know, under a lot of pressure, when you scream something during the rally or right before the return, it's really, really hard to be focused.
Iga was very polite in her request, but not everyone agreed with it. Badosa responded by saying Iga was lucky to be playing on the main court and that players had it worse on other courts. Personally, I think it's going to be very hard to control crowds, especially when they get excited during those long clay court rallies. Another thing we couldn't control was the forecast. Last week at Roland Garros was chaotic in terms of scheduling, mostly because of some wildly bad weather. It literally rained cats and dogs all week, and a few fans thought it was time to rename the French Open to the Drench Open, just because the courts were soaked all week. You could barely see the lines on some of the courts, and players ended up in limbo. And with the action continuing only under the retractable roof on Court Philippe Chatrier and on Court Suzanne Lenglen, which is also fitted with a roof, we saw late finishes like that Djokovic-Musetti match that ended past 3 a.m. By the way, I am making a video about Novak's Roland Garros run so far. I did some analysis and talked about his clay season in general, so I'm not going to talk about it too much right here. That said, it is interesting to see that Djokovic has more wins at Roland Garros than at the Australian Open or at any other slam. But here's how much that win against Musetti meant to his wife Jelena.
Djokovic just refused to give in. You look at that 5th set.
Meanwhile, Musetti is now 2-7 in 5 sets at the moment, and he'll be looking to fix that. Earlier in the year at the Australian Open, he lost in 5 sets to Luca Van Assche in the second round. At the US Open, he lost to an unseeded player, Tichuan Droguet, in the first round of the US Open. And then there was that 5-set loss to Lloyd Harris at the AO last year. Point being, Musetti needs to find more ways to get over the hump in matches that go the distance. Switching gears, let's quickly talk about some of the other top players from last week. 9th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas has been solid all tournament with win over Fucsovics, Altmaier, Zhang Zhizhen, and Matteo Arnaldi. The guy has been ripping forehands all week. Even his infamous backhand has caught fire at times. I mean, just look at this point against Fucsovics in round 1. I love how the Greek has been moving freely around the court and then ripping the ball with first strike aggression. Matteo Arnaldi tried to throw a wrench in his plans in the 4th round after taking the first set and serving for the second. However, Tsitsipas was up to the challenge thanks to this devastating forehand return. Tsitsipas went on to steal the set and break Arnaldi's spirits, and the Italian would only win 4 games in the remaining 2 sets. After the match, Tsitsipas said this.
It was one of the craziest comebacks I've had.
For Jannik Sinner, there were doubts about his physical condition with that hip injury that's on everyone's mind. And with only 9 days to prepare for Roland Garros, we all had our fingers crossed. But so far, Sinner has been in a league of his own. He looked to be pacing himself in the first round, but managed to save 9 of the 10 breakpoints he faced against Chris Eubanks. For all his efforts, Eubanks had nothing to show for it. When he ventured forward, this happened. And when he remained on the baseline, he got smoked. Sinner followed the straight sets win over Eubanks with a much better display against the veteran Richard Gasquet in the 2nd round. As you'd expect, Gasquet had a lot of fight in him, but still lost in straight sets. Facing Kotov in the 3rd round was a little bit tricky because we know Kotov can be one of the cleanest ball strikers on tour, but a single break of serve in each set proved to be enough for Sinner to get over the hump. Sinner dropped a set for the first time in the tournament against Mute following a shaky start in the 1st set, but as soon as he found his rhythm, Mute was no match for him. Oh, and Sinner followed his brilliance on the court last week with some hilarious press moments like this.
I'm not good in fashion, guys. They just give me the things to wear and I wear it, and I just try to look good.
Meanwhile, Mute will take some solace in being the first Frenchman to reach the 4th round since Gaston in 2020. But for Sinner, he's now 32-2 this year, and I'm looking forward to a possible semifinal clash with Alcaraz. For Medvedev, we already know that clay isn't his best surface. A 4-set win against Dominik Koepfer was followed by a Kecmanovic walkover. His most impressive victory was that 3rd round win over Tomas Machac. Medvedev was up 2 sets in a break until Machac decided to give him a run for his money with some grueling baseline exchanges that extended the match to 4 sets. Machac also led by a break in the 4 sets, but couldn't convert when needed. Medvedev ultimately rallied back to win after 3 hours and 24 minutes of high drama. But for all the action on the court, the real battle, according to some fans, was between Medvedev's leggings and Mahac's shorts. We also need to talk about Grigor Dimitrov because he's just reached a new milestone by entering his first Roland Garros quarterfinal. He breezed through his first 2 matches against Kovacevic and Marozsan, but we saw some cracks in his game against top 100 newcomer Zizou Bears in the 3rd round. Dimitrov was double faulting a lot in that match and had the lower win percentage on his 2nd serve. He also faced a total of 16 breakpoints the entire match, managing to save 11 of them. Now, clay hasn't been Grigor's best surface, so not many people saw him coming through against Hurkacz in the 4th round. However, he had history on his side, having won all 5 of his previous encounters against Hubie. We already know that Hurkacz loves those tiebreaks. Unfortunately for him, he fell short in the 2 tiebreaks against Dimitrov and ended up losing in straight sets after 2 hours and 51 minutes. Hurkacz did fire down 20 aces throughout the match, but it wasn't enough. In the end, a first quarterfinal berth at the French Open, and his reward for that, an opponent named Jannik Sinner. Well, Dimitrov has now reached the last 8 at each of the 4 Grand Slam tournaments and all of the Masters 1000 events, and he's in pretty exclusive company. Here's what that means to him. This time, Dimitrov had to do it against his good friend Hurkacz. However, the match will also be remembered for a strange conversation between both friends. Hurkacz, who seems to be entering his villain era, wanted to get rid of the umpire and swap her with another umpire because he thought some of the calls were controversial. To his credit, Grigor found a way to somehow neutralize the situation.
You gonna continue with the lady here. Honestly, it's
But really, it did look out of character from Hurkacz. I guess even the nicest guys have their off days. Now let me take you guys to that Andrei Rublev video I made a few weeks ago when we touched on his outbursts and meltdowns on the court. In the video, I pointed out the fact that many fans were worried about his self-sabotage. But then he goes on to win Madrid, and everyone is like, yeah, he's good. Well, unfortunately, what we saw on the court last week in his third round encounter against Matteo Arnaldi didn't look good. Rublev literally activated the nuke button on himself as he lost in straight sets to the Italian. I can't remember seeing Rublev in a worse condition. After the match, he admitted that he was disappointed in himself for his actions. Looks like there's still a lot of work to be done with his coping mechanisms and stress handling, but hopefully he puts his nose back to the grindstone. Switching over to one of the tournament favorites, Alexander Zverev backed up his statement win against Rafa with a dominant display against David Goffin to reach the third round at Roland Garros. Facing Talon Griekspoor, Zverev had a scare as the match went the distance. Griekspoor was clinical in his serve with great numbers behind both first and second serves, and his serve and volleying was equally as deadly, and so were the drop shots. Everything was clicking, and before we knew it, Zverev found himself down 1-4 in the fifth set and was facing an upset until the wheels fell off from Griekspoor. Unforced errors, missed volleys, and double faults were enough to condemn Griekspoor to defeat. The wait to enter the second week of a Grand Slam continues. Meanwhile, Casper Ruud has been flying under the radar. He was flawless on Tuesday when he began his Roland Garros campaign with a convincing straight sets win against the Brazilian Felipe Alves. He had an epic 5-set thriller against Davidovich Fokina, and honestly, that was one of the most animated versions of Ruud I've ever seen. I mean, look at his response after stealing the first set tiebreak. There was little to separate both players for large spells of the game, with each player creating and converting 5 out of 14 breakpoints. Ruud got the W in the end and followed that up with a big win over Tomas Martin Etcheverry in the third round. How far can the two-time finalists go this time? Shout out to the old boys Andy Murray and Stan Wawrinka who played each other in the first round. Just two 3-time Grand Slam winners who have a combined age of 76 years old. Stan brought back memories of those backhand winners, one backhand at a time. And here's how we put Murray to the sword. Back in the day when Stan was at the top of his game, no one could stop him. But at the end of the day, no one can wrestle against Father Time. Is this the last time we see these legends at Roland Garros? Interestingly, 12 of the top 13 seeds made the fourth round at Roland Garros this year, Rublev being the only exception. But Rune almost got beaten in the second round though. Facing Flavio Cobolli, Rune let a 2-sets-to-love lead slip out of his hands and found himself down love 5 in the fifth set tiebreak before he managed to flip the switch in the nick of time. Cobolli will regret his 3 missed break chances at 4-all, love 40 in the fifth set that would have allowed him to serve for the biggest win of his career. Switching over to the women's side, a lot has happened in the past week. Iga celebrated her 23rd birthday earlier in the week and had the Parisian crowd serenading her. Happy birthday to you. After a routine win in the first round, Iga found herself on the verge of what could have been the biggest upset of the tournament against Naomi Osaka in round 2. I made a deep dive about Iga a few days earlier, and I touched on why she was so difficult to beat on clay, but boy did she look vulnerable against a version of Naomi Osaka that we haven't seen in a while. Iga edged out Naomi to take the first set in the tiebreak. However, Naomi became an absolute beast, producing some of the cleanest and hardest ball striking you would ever see. Look at this. The second set was over quickly, and the Queen of Clay had just been dismantled and served a breadstick for good measure. I didn't think it was possible. By the third set, Naomi was serving for the match and even held a match point. However, Iga channeled her inner Rafa to save that break point. And here's the spark that ignited the fire. Iga found a way to come back from 3-5 down to win the set 7-5. It was an early match of the year contender for me, and while Naomi might have faltered in the end, I don't think she choked that match. It just wasn't meant to be. After the match, Naomi said this in her press conference, and you could just tell that she's in a much better place mentally.
I cried when I got off the court, but then, for me, I kind of realized, like, I was watching Iga, like, win this tournament last year, and I was pregnant, and it was just my dream to, like, be able to play her. So when I kind of think of it like that, I think I'm doing pretty well, and I'm also just trying not to be too hard on myself. I feel like I played her on her better surface. I'm a hard court kid, so I would love to play her on my surface and see what happens.
Iga cried after the match, but she knew that she had her work cut out for her. Swiatek breezed through her third-round encounter against Marie Bushkova before destroying Anastasia Potapova with a double bagel in 40 minutes in the fourth round. Iga only lost 10 points all match. What a player. Meanwhile, Iga's closest competitors, Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Gauff, have been on fire. None of them have dropped a set yet, and it'll be interesting to see how the later stages of the tournament play out for them. But let's talk about some of the crazy upsets we saw on the women's tour. In the first round, Elisabetta Cocciaretto came from a set down to beat last year's Roland Garros semifinalist Bia Haddad Maia, while number 6 seed Maria Sakkari suffered the same fate against Varvara Gracheva. It got even worse as the second round delivered a double dose of upsets. 23 seed Anna Kalinskaya got bounced by a resurgent Bianca Andreescu. This was BB's first tournament since August of last year, so you could tell that it meant a lot to her. After the match, she posted this. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Mira Andreeva down 19th seed Victoria Azarenka in 3 sets, while Yelena Ostapenko suffered the same fate against Clara Tauson. Peyton Stearns got rid of 10th seed Dasha Kasatkina, who could only manage a disastrous 38% win percentage on her second serve, but perhaps the biggest upset of the day was Danielle Collins losing to Olga Danilovic. Interestingly, I had just made a deep dive of Collins' season so far, so it sucked to see her lose. Did I jinx her? But really, Danilovic played out of her mind and was taking clean cuts of the ball. Back in Madrid, we saw Collins struggle against Danilovic. In fact, Danilovic served for the match, but it was Collins who got the W in the end. This time, it was the opposite of what happened in Madrid, with Danilovic doing everything right. Why does Collins struggle against Danilovic's lefty strokes? Anyone? There were some upsets on the men's side as well. Nico Jarry lost to Mute in the first round, and Cam Norrie's 5-set loss to Pavel Kotov. But the biggest of them all, apart from that Rublev loss, was Karen Khachanov's defeat to Josef Kovalev. After being up 2 sets in a break, Khachanov found a way to lose the match in what was truly an incredible collapse. Week 1 of Roland Garros was stacked, but there was also plenty of action off the court. John McEnroe received the French Legion of Honor Award from President Emmanuel Macron. Also, 1983 French Open winner Yannick Noah, who also happens to be the father to the former NBA star Joachim Noah, will succeed Bjorn Borg to become Team Europe captain for Laver Cup in 2025. Meanwhile, Andre Agassi will face Noah as captain of Team World following his appointment last week. Elsewhere, Arthur Fils admits that his results this season aren't what he expected and splits with Sergei Bruguera. Sebastian Grosjean stays in the team though. Meanwhile, Terence Atman issued an apology for hitting a spectator with the ball during his first-round match at Roland Garros. Federer continues to enjoy life after tennis, while Belinda Bencic shares a new photo with her baby girl, Bella. Earlier in the week, Jannik Sinner confirmed his relationship with Anna Kalinskaya. A few records were also created last week in tennis. Alizé Cornet played the final tournament of her illustrious career as she extended her record for consecutive main draw Grand Slam appearances to 6-9. And on the men's side, we had Gaël Monfils becoming the Frenchman with the most Grand Slam match wins in history, leapfrogging the legendary Jo-Wilfried Tsonga. And now to some of the craziest highlights from last week. We have that Casper Ruud tweener passing shot. And also Mahach's 2 left-handed forehands in the same point against Medvedev. Which other ones am I missing? Week 1 of the French Open was filled with insane drama on and off the court, but let me tell you, we are just getting started. Be sure to smash that subscribe button to keep up with all the action from both tours and help us towards our goal of 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And if you missed out on last week's videos, don't sweat it. I've got them showing on the screen for you right here.